My name is Greg Carlson. I am the Executive Director of the NYAHMA. We are part of a national organization called the National Affordable Housing Management Association. It's made up of affordable owners and managers and those that give services to affordable housing. Currently, we have about 350 members of the NYAHMA, and which represents over 60,000 units of affordable housing. We meet with HUD on a regular basis, and we have we've been meeting with other agencies. We just met with the NYCHA, the Housing Authority, New York City Housing Authority, and on December the 4th, right here, Kathleen Pendleton will be here because they have really, if you are doing anything with housing vouchers, which is not Section 8, it's the ones that they carry around with them, they're streamlining the whole system, and she'll be updating everyone on that. So I think that will be a nice way of learning what to do. Those of you who are not members, please become a member. On the desk right outside, we have this little pamphlet that you can sign up, or you can go to our website, NYAHMA.org, and you can sign up online. First of all, I'd like to introduce our moderator. His name is Hershel Weiss, and you tell the people about yourself and Alan Rothschild, okay, which are the two people present here. All right, so I turn the mic over to you, sir. Yeah, cheer.
Evidently, some of the people here are in my employ. We have three speakers today, myself among them, and we're talking about water. It's been raining since Mike Bloomberg took over office. The man has a Midas touch. It stopped 7 weeks ago when it became apparent he no longer would be with us. I'm wondering if it's going to start again. New York City, in spite of having an abundant rainfall, has raised water rates consistently since 1985. The water rate, if I got a little handout here, it's in the beige brochure, and what I am discussing is primarily related to lower income housing and the choices you're facing regarding rates. New York City, primarily, there's many rates, but there's two big rates that you've seen. One is metered water, which bills at $3.58 per 100 cubic feet, and sewer is added on to that at $5.69 per 100 cubic feet. And what you think of is $9.27 per 100 cubic feet. That doesn't mean anything to anybody, but what it is $1.03 a gallon. That's pretty cheap if you're buying bottled water, but if you think that an ultra low flow toilet is 1.28, that's a penny, 1.3 cents for a regular toilet. If you've got that old 5-gallon toilet in the building, 8 cents a toilet. If you've got a 50-gallon hot tub in an apartment, you probably don't, but 30-gallon tub, it's costing you 40 cents every time someone takes a bath. A running drip or a running toilet, easy, and no one believes it. A running toilet, I'm not talking that the toilet's, whooshing and making a lot of noise with the flushometer, can easy hit $1,500 a year per toilet. So if you're wondering where your water is, that's where it is. But that's just a background as to what you pay for water. The average apartment should be running you $800 or less per apartment per year. There is one other choice, that's the multifamily conservation program. That replaced frontage. and it's currently $944.22 for an apartment. I just said $800 per year for the average apartment, so $944 is high. But if you've got more than 3 people in an apartment, definitely if you've got a very dense apartment, $944 is not going to be that high. And that might be the only place you can go. If you've got doubled up tenants, as we're seeing more and more, that MCP may be the place you want to be. There's also an MCP rate for low-use commercial that I'm going to come back to at $777. So again, 2 rates, pay-as-you-go water under metered rate, and multifamily conservation. Tell me if we need, I don't think we need, tell me if we need the microphone. So, let's say you're on metered billing and want to get on to the MCP program. There's certain requirements which the DP is here today and they're going to go over in much more detail. But the first requirement is 4 apartments or more. You've got a 3-family, the MCP is not eligible to you. Find your leaks and deal with it, but there is no other choice. You have to have a DEP operational meter, and it has to be operational with an automatic meter reading unit in the building. Those are the little gray boxes you see outside. They say star on them, or DEP. The DEP wants to do a leak detection audit, and this is the biggest obstacle because they want to see no leaks. Could you imagine you've got a 100-unit building, no leaks? Not one leak, no leaks, but it's gotten easier to get on. And you have to have low-flow fixtures, which means if they're new fixtures, it would be a toilet of 1.28 gallons, shower head of 2.5, faucet 2.5. There's other requirements. I'm just listing the most common. And the laundry room has to have Energy Star rated fixtures. And Vlada will get into, if you don't have it, it's not the end of the world. You'll have to deal with it at some point in the near future. These are the basic goals to go from metered billing to MCP. I am not recommending this to anybody until they've done everything they can to bring down the consumption. Because once you get onto this high rate, you're probably going to want to stay there. So deal with your consumption problem if you can. As you say, if you got doubled up tenants, that works. The old excuse that we used to hear back in the Koch administration, these tenants are animals. I can't deal with it. It's not true. We've seen the biggest savings on Section 8 housing after there were retrofits done, after they repaired the piping. It's all a matter of numbers. The more people that are in your building, the more water you use. If people are unemployed, if people are staying home, they'll use more. If you get apartments with stay-at-home moms, well, they're cooking, they're cleaning, they're using more water. So that's really what it comes down to. There's no other demographic except population and how often they're home. That's what's going to drive this thing. But let's say you're, for whatever reason, you're on the MCP, probably population, and you want to stay there. I said before that it has to be a residential building, right? What do you do if you got a mixed-use building? A large part of our portfolio will have that one bodega on the first floor. The building's not eligible for the MCP unless you split your main at the point of entry and put in a separate meter for the residential portion and the commercial portion. Again, meter comes into your building, it now provides your whole building. You may have a sub-meter for the store. You now have to, if you want to stay on the MCP, if you want to be eligible for the MCP, you've got to split that main and have a separate meter for the store. There are certain caveats, and I'm sure Vlada will get to them if you have a low consuming fixture, etc. But the picture on the bottom, showing, the fire hydrant outside the building, line coming in, the dotted line going up to the apartments with 2 meters. That's this picture over here. Right after it, is anybody having problems with backflow devices getting violations from the city? No one? If you haven't, the city requires now that you put a backflow device in almost every building after the water meter. If you've just gone through this process and you split your main, you now need a second backflow device. So while you're thinking about your backflow requirements, it would behoove you to think about what are you doing with your meters and what your rates are at the same time. It starts getting a little complicated only because it is. Okay? Now, there's a certain class of buildings that met none of these requirements, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about. You've got a building, it was on frontage. It was always on frontage. In July 1st, and frontage was, you were paying for the width of the building, the height of the building, the number of apartments, number of sinks, number of tubs or shower heads, and number of toilets, and a bunch of other things. The city didn't like this system for many reasons. Primarily, I believe, it was complicated. An owner would call up and say, I don't have that many toilets in my apartment. I made the apartment bigger. I took out the bathroom. I never had the bathroom. They wanted to make this really simple. And that was one of the goals of the MCP program. They said, we charge you per unit. And they came up with the MCP. All those buildings that were on frontage and moved to metered, and in 2012, the city moved them against their will, with it, whatever. If you were on frontage, you were moved onto the MCP program, and you didn't have to meet any of these requirements. Great deal. Except the city saying they want those meters installed for the stores, they want the correct meters installed in the building. They want this all taken care of by January 1st, 2015. That's not far away. It's going to take, especially if you have to deal with the backflow and get permits from the DEP for that, you probably want to get going on this yesterday. It's going to take you 6 months. I mean, if you've got a bunch of stores in the building and you got to figure, it's going to take you 6 months to bid out a contract, get it done, and get everything going. It's something to move on today, and I wanted to discuss that. The other thing that I want to discuss is you have to get low-flow fixtures in your building. If you did the toilet rebate program back between 95 and 98, you've got no problem. It's done. For other reasons, you might want to look at those and see if they're still running low flow, but you've met that requirement. However, if you didn't install any low-flow toilets, or if your building wasn't built, if your building was built since 94, or rehabbed since 94, or there was a city gut, if there were any HPD buildings, almost all were retrofitted, they all have those low-flow toilets. But if you've got an older building, you've got to deal with it and put in water sense fixtures. I think that cost is not, we're talking about replacing every toilet, shower head, and aerator in your building. But 70%. The DEP will be, I think, discussing an upcoming program that will be providing financial assistance to do so. I don't think there's been a lot of talk about it. You'll be the first ones to hear about it this morning. So there'll be 12 people that know about it in New York City. And that's the next talk, and that's the segue. There's a few other caveats I just wanted to discuss before moving on to this segue. If you're thinking of making this switch from metered billing, from frontage to metered billing, if you're thinking of making this switch from frontage to meter to frontage, don't assume that the information that you're seeing on your bill is highly accurate. You'll now hear from the DEP a lot of great things and a lot of information out there. Before you make any switch, make sure you got a new meter in your building. Old meters were running slow. if you made this calculation with a slow meter, you may find yourself in trouble. And that's it. I have the pleasure of introducing Vlada Kenniff, Director, I think, of Conservation. Is that the title?
Thank you, Hershel. Hershel was actually the one who invited me. I did print out 10 copies of the presentation, so each one of you should have a copy. If you don't, I can distribute it via email. So just let me know after the presentation and I will give you my card and we'll email you the presentation. A lot of what I'm going to be covering, Hershel had already covered, but I do want to give you a little bit of history of how we ended up with this frontage rate. The frontage rate was established in 1992. I know you said a lot of you have been on this frontage rate forever. That's not necessarily true. 1992 was when the DEP and the New York City Rent Guidelines Board did a study to see what kind of buildings would be better off on frontage versus metered billing. And so what they found out was 65% of all the buildings that were currently on frontage would have been better off on metered billing. Didn't have to do anything, just switch to metered billing. About 20%, another 20% of the buildings, if they did some retrofits, some conservation work in their buildings, would have been better off on metered billing. There's another 15% of the buildings that, because of high occupancy, because of inefficiencies in the buildings, probably no matter what they would have done, they wouldn't have been better off on meter billing. So this transitional rate was created in 1992 and was renewed every year after. So we've had this rate for a decade, and last year in 2012 we had to decide what to do with this transitional frontage rate. We had another rate that was very similar, a fixed rate. So instead of renewing, again, this rate, we looked at what the frontage rate was, what the MCP rate was. Again, it's a fixed rate, it's kind of similar, but there are, as Hershel described, requirements attached to this rate. And so the MCP rate, as an agency, we decided that all the frontage accounts would be transitioned to this rate. Also would help a lot of the accounts. We also looked at the accounts and saw kind of a similar picture. A lot of the accounts would have been better off on meter billing. So with retrofits or without. And so we, as an agency, we would like to move towards metered billing throughout the agency. It's just easier for us to issue bills, to let our customers monitor their data, their information. We're, like 96% metered throughout the city. So this is a very small portion of our portfolio that's not metered. And we don't really know, it's hard to sort of plan around this specific population. So as Hershel described, to be on the multifamily conservation program rate, you have to be a 4+ unit building. The charges for fiscal year 14 are $944.22 per regular residential apartment, $777.35 for commercial unit, and there's an SRO type units that get a charge of $267.76. So I don't know, actually I don't know if a lot of you are managers, or can you just raise your hand if you're a manager of a building or work with a manager of a building? Great. Okay, so you're probably asking yourself, I'm on slide 5. You're asking yourself these water management decisions all the time. How much water am I using? Is the residential use sufficiently high so that the MCP rate is right for me? How much of our use is from commercial tenants versus residential? Am I covering the costs of water for my commercial tenants if your charge is included in the total bill? And is the high use from population density versus versus inefficiencies? So I'm just going to dive into the MCP rate specifically. To be on the MCP rate, you have to remain current on your bills. That's kind of obvious. Your facility has to be fully metered and have a functioning AMR, automated meter reading device. The owner has to allow DEP to upgrade their meters. The high-use commercial tenants, as Hershel mentioned, have to be separately metered. If the property is not metered by January 15th, January 1st of 2015, that's one of the deadlines that Hershel covered, you have to install a meter, or there are attributable charges, or other penalties that will be instituted. And we have a large meter replacement program that's currently in place. We are out there replacing meters all the time. Meters that are 7 years old or older tend to not function properly, so we're constantly replacing meters. And that's, if you know that your meter is 7 years old or older, do reach out to DEP and we'll go out there and replace the meter. Conservation requirements, there are obviously conservation requirements, multifamily conservation rate. The toilets have to be 1.6 gallons per flush if replaced before the July of 2012, before the transition. If it's after the transition, we are asking that the toilets would be the WaterSense certified, the 1.28 gallons per flush. They're more efficient. And as Hershel mentions, the requirements have to be completed by June of 2016. The good news is there is this 70% of the building requirement for efficient fixtures and washers. But the good news is this population, the population that got transitioned from frontage to MCP, qualifies for phase 1 of the toilet replacement program. And I'll go into more detail on that later. I did mention the washers have to be Energy Star rated, and that's not necessarily at the entrance to the MCP program. You can sort of phase it out with the new bids that are going out. Leaks are important. Hershel mentioned them. It is important that you detect your leaks. And the idea behind all of this is you get your building to be efficient and probably think about switching to meter billing. And if you are monitoring your leaks and you understand where they're happening, it's the same idea as being on meter billing. You are going to be cutting down your costs. Okay. If you are on meter billing, you can switch to MCP, but when you do make the application, all of the requirements of MCP have to be met. I did want to cover meter billing as well. I don't know how many building managers have buildings that are on meter billing. Yes, okay. So meter billing is great. We've invested, as an agency, we've invested a lot into automated meter reading, into metering, into building out our web portal that allows you to monitor your use. So I am on slide 11, and it's something that, anytime we talk or go out there, we really encourage the building managers to use. So it's the My DEP account, allows you to do wonderful things, and it's very easy to access. As soon as you come to our website, there's a big blue button, very visible. Click on that. If you're not registered, I do encourage you highly to register for it. And if you're on meter billing, you can quickly detect leaks. There's a leak notification function that we allow you to sign up for, and that's basically a logarithm that tracks your consumption. And if it significantly changes by, let's say 50, 60%, I think you can set what the percentage is. It will send you an email notification that your your use has changed. So definitely a great tool. You can pay your bills online. You can sign up for paperless billing. So all these things are, a great way to manage your portfolio of buildings or a single building. On slide 13, 14, I basically show you how to get there and how to sign up. On slide 15, do take a look. This is a typical account with a leak, and you can very easily see how this is very helpful. You can track your water usage daily because you have an AMR device. And this definitely shows you where and when the leak had occurred. I do apologize, the slide 16 I think is slightly outdated in terms of water and sewer billing, but it does give you an idea of what a leak could do to your bill. So a full open faucet can cost you about $15,000 a year. A constantly running toilet could cost you about $26,000 a year. So these are really things to think about. And again, this is the slide 17, the leak notification option. As I explained before, you can set your percentage, and it will send you a notification on when the leak is occurring. On slide 18, I do show you, we do have a tool that allows you to compare if you're on MCP versus meter billing. If you do have a meter installed at your building, you can now make a judgment for yourself and decide, am I better off on meter billing or am I better off on MCP? So we've rolled out this functionality. Okay, the toilet replacement program. So who qualifies? As I mentioned, and Hershel mentioned, the buildings that are currently on the MCP rate that got transitioned from frontage to MCP in July of last year, that's the population that qualifies. There are a couple of things in there. You have to have not participated in the original toilet replacement program, toilet rebate program of the 90s. And if you did not replace, by now, toilets with efficient types, you're qualified. The only other thing is you do have to have a meter installed because most of our monitoring is done through the AMR devices. As you know, resources are limited these days, and instead of like in the 90s, we had inspectors going out to make sure the installations were completed. This time we're relying more heavily on our AMR device and the technologies. If the reductions are not observed in the accounts that participated in the TRP, an inspector would go out and check to make sure that the installations were done. How does it work? It will be, we are building out a portal that will be completely attached to the MyDEP. I did talk about that before. And it will be completely linked to the billing system and to your account. If you are eligible, there will be a tab that shows up in the billing system in MyDEP and will let you apply for the vouchers. The vouchers are equivalent to $125 per unit. So if you have up to 70% of the building. So if you have 100 units in the building, 70 of those units will be eligible for a $125 voucher. So the rest of the slides will just really give you snapshots of what the portal looks like. We are still building it out. We're hoping to roll out the toilet replacement program in end of December, which is very soon. So all of the eligible accounts will be contacted. If you're an eligible account, you know ahead of time now. And the program will last about 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. We are in the process of contracting with wholesaler plumbing supply entities throughout New York City. There's 7 of them. There's a couple of them in each borough, one in Staten Island. The rest of the boroughs have 1 or 2. And so it is designed to be easily accessible, and there's one more component to this program. We are also looking to recycle the old toilets. So when you purchase your new toilets, the DP asks for you to bring back the old toilets. We're gonna have roll-off containers set up at each one of the locations. And the goal is to crush the porcelain and use it as sub-base in streets and sidewalks. So that's it. If you do have any questions, I have cards, and do come by.
Thank you, Vlada. There's very few people here, and very few people in New York know that this is about to happen. I urge you to take advantage of everything she's spoken about and really get on it quick, because I think you'll find out that people from the last time that missed it really missed out on getting this work done. And there'll be before you know it, it'll be over. Vlada had mentioned that there's this great portal that provides you with a lot of information by the DP on your water bill, and I urge everyone to get on there. However, once you've gotten on and you have a leak, what do you do about it? Or, if you know you're not the person looking at that meter, because you're getting tired, you looked at it for the first 2 weeks, you're worried about the millions of other things you worry about in the building, who's going to look at that data for you? Or if you're worried about, what do I do with the stores that I've got? What do I do about my sub-meters? Who's going to look at all this stuff? There's one guy that can answer those questions. That's Alan Rothschild of Vantage Group, and I think I'll let him tell you about his product.
Thank you, Hershel. Hello, everyone. I'll talk briefly about what we do, and then we'll open up to questions. I'm president. My name is Alan Rothschild. I'm president of Vantage Group, and what we do we call strategic water cost management. Most of you, I'm sure, have multi-unit buildings, possibly with hundreds of units and possibly with a retail component. Managing your water can get very complicated. Plus, as Hershel mentioned, you all have other things to do. What we do is we specialize in helping building managers manage their water costs. How many of you are on metered billing? And how many are on MCP, flat rate? So it's a mixture. You don't really need to be afraid of metered billing. When I first got into this, it was because I had other owners who were afraid of the conversion to metered billing from what was then frontage. And as I believe Hershel and Vlada have both said, most buildings are better off on metered rate, believe it or not. Especially if you manage your costs a little bit. Do some basic conservation work and monitor your use. And that's where we come in. We monitor use, we specialize in that, because we found if you pay attention to your water use, it's pretty easy to keep it under control and to keep yourself well below the MCP rate, unless you have a really high density building with, shall we say, not optimum maintenance procedures. What we do is we install a device that is a backup to the city's meter reading system, because we found there are some issues with the city's equipment, and that sometimes some very funny things can happen with meters, particularly in larger buildings where you might have more than one supply line and several meters, or possibly even 5 or 10 meters. So we install equipment that is hooked up piggyback to the city's meters and is hooked up to any sub-meters that you have. And from that, we can get readings virtually whenever we want to, and we can watch what's going on in a building. And having done this for many years, it's approaching 20 years now, we found we can detect things pretty quickly with our experience that you might not spot, even looking at the city's new portal and their new information. Because, again, you're busy, you're not experiencing this stuff, and you might not spot something that could turn into a big problem. I've passed out on the tables here a little chart. It's a report that kind of typical of what we send to our clients each month. And I wanted to show you what can happen if you do monitor your water use carefully and if you maybe don't monitor it carefully. If you look at the chart at the bottom, this is a building that we had as a client for many years with our backup meter reading system, which at that point the city didn't even have theirs. And if you look at the chart, you can see that they had pretty steady and stable water use up until a certain point. Well, at the point where the bar graph gets into red columns, that's the point at which the board decided that they didn't need to monitor their water use any longer, and they asked us to remove our device. And as you can see, the cost got quickly out of control. In this particular building, the use tripled very rapidly. And after about a year of this, and after about a year of fighting with the DEP and claiming that the meter was wrong, they finally called us back in to figure out what was happening in the building. We reactivated our device, and we watched the use patterns, and we quickly saw that there was something running with an extreme amount of water. As Hershel and Vlada have mentioned, it can get very expensive if water's running all the time. And it turned out that there was a penthouse in this building with an irrigation system, and when they winterized it, they had left the drain valve open all the time, completely open for almost a year. It cost this building $40,000. So I just wanted to show you that as an example. Once we got that under control and started monitoring the building again, you can see that the use stabilized. It's a good example of what I'm trying to tell you, and that is if you're on metered rates, you should be monitoring your use, whether you do it with the DEP's portal, or look at it yourself, or have our equipment installed where we watch it for you. Once you're on metered rates, it's very, very critical. And subtle things can happen in big buildings. In a single family home or a small building, if you have a leak, you generally know it. In a big building, there are often complex plumbing systems and things can get out of control very quickly. That's all I have to say, that it's important to monitor your use. Okay, and even if you're on MCP, a lot of you may not realize you might be better off on meter. And if you're monitoring your use, you'll know that relatively quickly. Thank you.
People are asking, why is New York City spending and rolling out a lot of money now to take care of conservation? It's been raining forever. If you look at the reservoirs, they're constantly full. And, you know, why is Mike Bloomberg or the next mayor going to shell out a lot of money to pay for this? There is an extreme urgency to do something about conservation. And Vlada, maybe you'd like to talk about this just for a moment. It's very interesting to me as an engineer.
So we, as an agency, have very much refocused. We're probably the only utility in the Northeast that is investing so much in water conservation. The reason we did it in the 1990s was to control our wastewater side of the equation for the agency. As you know, we have 14 wastewater treatment plants that were at capacity and above capacity in the 90s, and we really needed to lower that, the water usage or the water intake in those wastewater treatment plants, and that's why we pumped a lot of money into the original toilet rebate program. The driver behind this toilet replacement program is we do have a leak in a Delaware aqueduct. As you know or probably don't know, we get our water from upstate. There's a large network of lakes and reservoirs that the water from those get delivered in two large aqueducts, the Catskill and the Delaware. And the Delaware aqueduct has a large leak in it. It's about 15 to 35 milligallons of water per day. It's huge. And so it's been discovered for about a decade. We know about it for a decade now. And it's a huge problem for the DEP. There isn't any imminent risk of collapse, but if we kind of left it alone for years to come, there's a possibility that this thing collapses. And so the Delaware aqueduct delivers 50% of New York City's water. So half of what we use in New York City comes from this aqueduct. So you can imagine the catastrophic consequences of this thing collapsing. So we need to repair it. The Bloomberg administration had put it at the top of the list. I'm 100% sure that the next administration is going to put it at the top of the list. It's very important to repair this leak. And it takes a long time. As you know, we just recently activated the third tunnel. It took 40 years to construct and complete the tunnel. We're moving a lot faster on this aqueduct. It's actually somewhat similar. To repair the aqueduct, you have to deactivate the portion that's leaking and build another tunnel around it and connect it to the existing tunnel. So it's a huge engineering operation, very difficult. We have thousands and thousands of, well, not thousands, but yeah, maybe thousands of engineers working on it now. We've already started the shafts for the bypass tunnel, so that's the tunnel that's going to go around the leak. And we are on pretty accelerated schedule. We're hoping to shut down the aqueduct. To make the connection, you actually have to shut down the aqueduct for a period of 6 to 9 months. That means the New York City will be without this 50% supply that we're so happy to get every day. We are working on augmentation. Luckily, in the last 2 years, things have changed. When I came on board 2 years ago, they brought me in as a demand management expert. The shutdown period was 2 years, and that meant a lot more augmentation of water. We were actually talking to New Jersey, we were talking to Nassau County to get additional water. But because it's a much shorter duration now, the need for water is a lot less. And we're actually thinking we'll be able to meet it with this TRP, the Toilet Rebate Program, this conservation measure. We really are tightening on our metering. That's why we're encouraging people to get on metering, to monitor their water usage. If we have a huge percentage of our portfolio that doesn't know what's going on, and there are leaks that are happening when we are offline with the aqueduct and trying to get water from somewhere else, it's a huge issue for us. But yeah, I think we're going to be able to get through, because demand has been declining, we're going to be able to get through this 6 to 9 months period without too much additional augmentation.
Thank you all. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Nina Wallen from Ashokan. Nina can answer almost anything. Alan about AMR, and Vlada. And I think people can call you if they have questions.
They can.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.